Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, Mary, how are you?
I'm great,
Hi.
thank you.
Okay, you've been staying with us the whole event, so I really
Yeah, it's been
appreciate it.
fantastic.
Yes, yes, we are trying to do something interesting here. So it's your time right now. The microphone is yours, the stage is yours. So
All
go ahead.
right, let's see if I can do this. We got it.
So
Mhm.
yes, I can see your screen. Go ahead.
All right, let me move this out of the way here. Okay. Well, hi there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. This session is called LinkedIn Storytelling for Leaders, Building Trust Without Risk. We're going to talk about how to grow your personal brand and earn visibility on LinkedIn without raising red flags or putting your reputation at risk using the R.E.L.A.T.E framework. I'm Mary Killelea. I spent 9 years at Intel in a variety of marketing roles. Early on, starting back in 2015, I worked closely with senior leaders as part of a leadership marketing team, helping them build their voices on LinkedIn, everything from strategy and cadence to actual posts. But fast forward to 2024, when I was a regional campaign marketing manager, and our very expensive agency of record was telling us something interesting. Boosted thought leadership posts were constantly outperforming traditional brand posts. So naturally, we decided to push more of those. And that's really where we are today. So, after working alongside senior leaders for years and watching what performs and what gets approved and what quietly gets killed before it ever sees the light of day, I started noticing something. The posts that actually build trust don't look like traditional leadership messaging at all. They aren't perfectly polished, they aren't safe, and ironically, they're the ones leaders are most afraid to share. Which brings me to the post I almost didn't share. It was earlier this year. I had written something vulnerable. It was about a moment when I second guessed myself as a leader. I rewrote it 5 times and then I hovered over that little X up in the corner of the browser window and I thought to myself, this is too much. You're going to look weak. What if it backfires? But then something inside me said, no, this is exactly the kind of voice people need more of. So I hit post. And what happened next pleasantly surprised me. Later that day, there were hundreds of comments. I received dozens of DMs, and 3 new relationships came out of it. And one of them turned into a client I still work with today. It wasn't the most polished thing I've ever written, but it was the most human. And that's what this talk is about: trust, not perfection, showing up without sounding like a robot or putting your reputation at risk. LinkedIn has completely transformed. It's no longer just a resume site. It's a reputation engine, and the data backs it up. 83% of decision makers say that trust thought leadership more than advertising. And even more telling, 60% say that content from individuals is more credible than content from brands. Now let that sink in. Your voice as a leader carries more trust than your company's brand content. So, why are more executives still silent? A 2023 Forbes Business Council article summed it up perfectly. And yes, I did ask chat for something more recent, but they quoted this as being the most credible and said that executive visibility creates opportunity, but it also creates risk. Posts can be misinterpreted. Oversharing can open security vulnerabilities. PR or legal teams may get nervous. A single post taken out of context can trigger backlash. So, what happens? Executives freeze. They post safe, vague content or nothing at all. And that leads us to the visibility dilemma. You want to lead, but you don't want to make headlines for the wrong reasons. That's why I built the R.E.L.A.T.E framework. It's a simple 6-part method for showing up as a leader with presence, not performance. The R.E.L.A.T.E framework is broken out into 6 key content principles. Research, relevance reduces risk. Empathy, make what you write felt, not just understood. Language, speak human, not corporate. Authenticity, show what's real, not perfect. Tone, be bold without being arrogant. And engagement, invite conversation and dialogue. In the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through each pillar of this framework. We start with R for research. Relevance reduces risk. Most executives write from their own perspective, but relevance really starts with the audience and knowing what's happening. So before you post, use LinkedIn search. Look at what your peers are talking about. What's trending? What's triggering engagement? The worst thing that you can do is use something trending in the wrong way or miss an opportunity to be relevant because you were out of the loop on what was current. For example, the original idea was to write a post about company growth, but timing-wise, it coincided with a wave of tech layoffs. So we had some adjustments for our client, and we wrote it as the best leaders don't just hire, they part with people with integrity. That simple shift of adding the part with people with integrity helped be relevant for the times. And it led to comments and likes and real connection because it didn't ignore what people were feeling. It met them where they were. E is for empathy. Make your content felt, not just understood. This isn't about emotion. It's about emotional intelligence. Ask yourself, how will your story make someone feel? A great example of empathy that I've seen was from a head of sales who shared, I used to reward the people who worked late until one of them told me quietly that it was hurting my kids. He went on to write, that conversation changed how I defined performance. That post won respect because it showed empathy. Now moving on to L for language. Speak human, not corporate. Your content should sound like you're talking to someone, not presenting to a boardroom. Skip the acronyms, avoid corporate jargon. I saw a post the other day that said, excited to unveil our latest innovation, designed to optimize workflows across key verticals. Now, sure, that's technically accurate, but who is that actually for? Now, imagine if they would have just said, our team finally built what everyone's been asking for. Now you can generate client reports in one click, no more copying and pasting from 5 different tabs. It's the same product, same value, just better language. Next, we have A for authenticity. Show what's real. Leaders don't need to overshare, but they do need to be real because people don't connect with perfection. They connect with honesty. And sometimes that's as simple as saying, here's a mistake I made, or here's something I wish I would have done differently. One of the best examples that I've seen came from a former exec, and he wrote, I used to micromanage because I thought I was helping. Turns out I was just scared of being overperformed. That was authenticity looks like. It doesn't mean putting your whole life online. It just means being willing to show your human side, especially when you're in a position of power. If you're an executive wondering what that looks like in practice, here's some starting points. Talk about what you've learned, not just what you've achieved. Share what you're still figuring out, not what you've mastered. And share what made you question your message rather than just repeating your message. T is for tone. Think of it as the invisible trust signal. Bold is good, arrogant, not so much. It's a fine line, especially when you're writing with authority. I saw a post recently from a founder that said, if you don't have a retention strategy, you don't have a business. Now, that's a strong statement, and depending on your tone, it can either spark curiosity or it can shut people down. But then he followed it up with, we learned that the hard way. Here's how we fixed it. That changed everything. Instead of sounding like a lecture, it landed like leadership. So when you're writing something bold, ask yourself, am I inviting people in or putting them in their place? Tone decides which one it feels like. E is for engagement. And I don't just mean impressions. I mean invite conversations. I'm talking about real interactions, thoughtful dialogue. The goal isn't to deliver a monologue, it's to start a conversation. That means asking something, make space for others to weigh in. One of the best examples that I've seen came from a CRO who posted about losing a major deal. At the end of the post, he asked, anyone else learn from a loss than a win? What stuck with you? This worked because he didn't just share a story, he invited a response. Here are a few other examples of ways to spur engagement at the end of a post. Here's one example. You could say, curious, how have you handled this in your team? Or you could write, if you've ever been through something similar, what would you add? Or thirdly, you could say, what's a common industry belief you think we need to challenge? These don't just encourage comments, they create conversation. And when your audience feels like they're part of that conversation, they're far more likely to engage. To recap, we learned about the R.E.L.A.T.E framework and how it's broken out into 6 key content principles. Research, relevance reduces risk, know what's happening before you post. Empathy, make your readers feel your content, not just understand it. Share something that resonates emotionally. Language, speak human, not corporate. Clear always beats clever. Authenticity, show what's real, not perfect. Honesty earns trust. Tone, be bold, not arrogant. Lead with confidence, not ego. Engagement, invite conversation. Don't just post, connect. Now let's look at some before and after scenarios. So let's start with the one of the most common posts that I see executives write around product launches. And it often reads, excited to share our new product launch. Big thanks to the team. Congratulations. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. It's positive, it's polite, but it doesn't really connect. It doesn't show anything meaningful. Now, look at the same moment, but reframed. We launched something new today. I'm proud of the hard calls and the moment we almost gave up and didn't. Curious what's been your hardest launch moment? Okay, it's still a product launch, but now you're telling a real story. You're showcasing your team's effort. You're owning the messiness behind the scenes. Neither one is long, but they're both conveying the same message. But in the second one, you see there's authenticity, there's empathy, and it ends with engagement. That small shift is what builds trust. Let's look at another really common one, the promotion post. Here's the before. Excited to share, I've been promoted to Senior VP, grateful for the opportunity. Again, nothing wrong with this. It's respectful, it's safe, but it doesn't tell me anything. Now look at the after. 5 years ago, I nearly quit this path. What changed? The right mentors, trusting my instincts, owning my voice. And then it closes with the line, if you're in the messy middle, keep going. Same milestone. It has totally different impact. Instead of announcing success, it reflects on the journey. Instead of bragging about the moment, it acknowledges the doubt that came before it. That's why it feels human and you're drawn in. And that's what builds trust, especially when you're in a senior role. Here's a post comparison from a sales leader, and I want you to feel the difference in tone. Here's the before. B2B sales must leverage buyer intent. While it is accurate, it reads like a bullet point from a webinar deck. Now here's the after. We lost a deal the other day and it cost us big. Sales leaders, when's the last time you just listened? It's the same topic, but with a different tone. The first version positions him as an expert. The second one makes him human. That shift from telling to reflecting is what builds credibility and connection. Because we don't just trust perfection, we trust people who are willing to admit when they miss the mark occasionally and want to do better. Now let's look at a founder post. Here's the before. Proud to share how far we've come this year. Founding a company is never easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding. Grateful to the team for support. Now this is fine, it checks the boxes, but it doesn't really say anything. There's no insight, no reflection. Nothing for the reader to connect to. Now let's look at the after. Learning to ask for help sooner has probably saved me years. Hiring a COO this year was a turning point for the business and for me. This is simple, honest, and real. It shares a shift in mindset. It points to a hard-earned lesson. That authenticity, that tone, and it builds trust by sounding human. Now, I wanted to highlight an executive who I think does a really strong job managing his personal brand on LinkedIn. Full disclosure, I don't help him with his copy. I just genuinely admire this man and how he shows up on LinkedIn. His name is Pat Gelsinger. Pat Gelsinger has more than 4 decades of experience in technology leadership. He's currently chairman of the board at Snowcap, a general partner at Playground, global executive chair, and head of technology at Glow, and he's also the former CEO of Intel. I pulled a few posts from his feed to show his style in doing the research for this presentation. You'll notice that while some include photos, most of his posts are actually text-based. Pat treats LinkedIn like a public forum. He uses it to share his perspective on technology and leadership, to build genuine interest without ever crossing into confidential or sensitive territory. He speaks from lived experience with empathy and good judgment. Faith and family are clearly important to him, and because of that, even complex or sensitive topics come across as thoughtful leadership rather than risk. When you look at his content through the R.E.L.A.T.E framework, it's very intentional. You see research in how he speaks, in what's happening in the moment, whether that's policy shifts, leadership challenge, or big decisions, before offering his point of view. You see empathy in how he's constantly putting people first, teams, students, colleagues, and the broader impact of leadership. His language is simple and human. It's reflective, it's story-driven, and never sounds like a press release. He's authentic. He shares real lessons, real practices, and real experiences, not just polished wins. His tone is confident but grounded, bold without ego, thoughtful without preaching. And when it comes to engagement, he invites reflection and conversation. He's never talking down to anyone. The result is credible, safe visibility that builds trust even in a highly public and regulated environment. Here, I want to highlight Liz Cintoni, another executive who I think does a really strong job with her personal brand on LinkedIn. She posts consistently and is very clear who she is and what she stands for. Liz is currently the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Experience Officer at Cisco. I pulled a few posts from her feed to look at how she shows up. You'll see a mix of personal photos, references to her family, highlights of partners of Cisco, and a lot of text-based posts as well. But what's powerful isn't the format themselves, it's how she communicates. When you look at her content through the R.E.L.A.T.E framework, it's very intentional. You see research in how she anchors posts to timely moments, leadership themes, and even metaphors that make complex topics easy to understand. You see empathy in how she consistently centers people, teammates, customers, kids, learners, and leadership navigating change. She openly acknowledges uncertainty and growth. Her language is clear and human. She uses storytelling, sports metaphors, books, questions, and lived moments, not technical jargon or corporate positioning. She's very authentic. She shares real reflection, evolving beliefs, learning moments, family influence, and genuine curiosity. Her tone is confident without ego. She shares bold ideas with humility and remains open to different perspectives. And when it comes to engagement, she invites conversation through thoughtful questions and reflection, encouraging dialogue rather than broadcasting conclusions. The result is high trust executive visibility that feels human, credible, and safe, even when discussing complex and emerging technology. What I want you to notice is this. Pat and Liz don't sound the same, but strategically, they're doing the same thing. They both treat LinkedIn as a public leadership forum. They just show up in very different ways. And this is where the R.E.L.A.T.E framework really comes to life. It's not about sounding like Pat or Liz. It's about using the same principles in a way that feels true to you as a leader. Up until now, we've been talking about content, what you post, how you show up, and how leaders build trust through what you share. But here's the part most people miss. The R.E.L.A.T.E framework doesn't end when you hit post. It continues in how you respond. Because on LinkedIn, reputation isn't built just in what you post. It's built in the moments that follow. That's why it's important to go through comments, responding with intention, not automation or silence. The same principles apply here: research, empathy, language, authenticity, tone, and engagement. So let's take a minute and talk about ignoring comments. Most executives aren't trying to be rude. They're busy, they're cautious, and they don't want to say the wrong thing. But when someone takes the time to comment on a post or send a thoughtful DM and hears nothing back, the message they receive usually isn't "they're busy." All they hear is "I didn't matter enough to them to respond." And that quietly undermines trust. This isn't about you personally responding to every comment or DM. It's about recognizing that how you respond is now part of your leadership visibility. That's why many leaders have support to monitor their comments and DMs, not to respond for them, but to make sure important messages don't get missed. Because the R.E.L.A.T.E framework applies here too. Every response should reflect empathy, human language, authenticity, the right tone, and an invitation to engage. Addressing comments is important. I'm not encouraging you to write long responses back in the comments, but ask yourself, did you actually read what they say? Did you acknowledge their perspective? Does your response sound like you? Now, a few realities leaders need to be aware of. Not every comment deserves the same level of response. Some will try to argue with you publicly. This luckily doesn't happen that often on LinkedIn, at least not from what I've seen, but it is something to be aware of. R.E.L.A.T.E doesn't mean reacting to everything. It means knowing when to respond and when not to. Thoughtful silence is sometimes the right leadership move. Another reality is there's a ton of AI-generated comments, as we all know. They're often polished, generic, and say very little. Over time, you can tell which responses are genuine and which ones aren't. Your job isn't to reward volume, it's to engage where there's real intention. This is also why many executives don't monitor comments on their own. Having a trusted team member or partner help you monitor your feed can save you time, reduce worry, not to respond for you, but to flag matters, filter out what doesn't, and surface the conversations worth your attention. All right, DMs. DMs can feel informal, but they can carry a lot of weight too. It takes a bit of judgment to see what is legit and what is a waste of time. This is where real things happen. Deals are discussed, recruiters reach out, partnerships are formed, but there's also a lot of spam and plenty of unaligned sales pitches. The goal isn't to respond to everything. It's to respond intentionally to what matters. And the same R.E.L.A.T.E principles apply here. Empathy, clear language, authenticity, tone, engagement. Because people may forget what you posted, but they remember how you showed up one-to-one. So I want to bring this back to where we started. That post I almost didn't share wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished, but it was real. And that's why it worked. What I've learned and what I hope you take away is this. Leadership visibility isn't about being loud. It's about being intentional. The R.E.L.A.T.E framework isn't about posting more. It's about showing up with empathy, clarity, honesty, and respect in public and in private. In your posts, in your comments, and especially in your DMs. So here's my ask. When you are posting this week, ask yourself, does this acknowledge what people are navigating right now? Will this land as understanding, not instructing? Does this sound like me speaking and not like I'm talking at them? Am I sharing a lesson and not performing? Is this confident without putting others down? Am I inviting conversation and not broadcasting conclusions? If you are mindful of this approach, I promise you, you will build trust without risking your reputation. So here's my QR code. Please scan it and connect with me. I've enjoyed today and I've enjoyed this presentation. So happy that I could be a part of this.
Thank you so much for that lovely presentation. You know, your slides are so cozy and warm, like it's weather. I really like the style. So, and did you know that your surname comes from Irish words, actually? Did you know that?
Well, my husband's Irish, so yeah.
Ah, really cool. And it means a son of a gray-haired guy, something like this.
Oh, really? I did
So,
not know that.
yeah, it's always cool to come to such conference. You can know something interesting there. So I know we have only 3 minutes left, but I have one interesting question for you from the audience, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You framed LinkedIn as a reputation engine and not a content platform. And the question, what's the biggest mistake leaders make when they still treat it like a marketing channel?
Hmm. What's the biggest mistake?
Right. It's kind of tricky question.
Um, well, I think it comes down to objectives that the company is trying to drive, because there are a lot of different reasons that companies can be present on LinkedIn. Um, the executives that I've worked with in the past and present, it's about building thought leadership. We know that, it helps the sales teams when you've got your executives out there in force, you know, accessible and talking about products and really not hidden behind some gated walls like they used to be in the past, and the dynamics of making them real and relatable. It just makes people want to connect with products and services of those companies in new ways. And I think sometimes that's all you can ask of executives, and that's okay. Not every
Okay.
executive has to be a salesperson.
Yes, sure. Yes, 100% agree. Thank you so much for this answer. So we have another question, maybe not so tricky, and it comes from myself. Because no, actually, for leaders who are afraid of looking weak, what's one example of vulnerability that increases authority instead of reducing?
Um, Say that again.
Uh, what's one example of vulnerability that increases authority instead of reducing it?
I think calling it out. I think, saying an example of a time where you felt vulnerable, but that
Hmm.
you were brave and still still persevered. Um, I think being bold in your own life, or like I've been inspired by many women in leadership who have told me that they get on stage and they're nervous, and I'm thinking, how in the world, they're wonderful speakers, how could they be nervous? And just knowing that they go to the bathroom and they get up there and they like look in the mirror and they stand there and they do their little, Wonder Woman pose, that was really, vulnerable, but they shared that to help me, like those things are meaningful. So I think it's just real life, just talking to people without the titles. That's what I
Really,
think LinkedIn's value really is. It's it's removing the titles and just connecting as humans, and not worrying about what company you work for, and if you could just connect one-on-one and share what your products are and really relate on that human one-to-one, I think deals are made and connections through relationships more than.
Okay, yes, sure, agree 100%. Okay, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. We have some more questions. I'm gonna collect them and send you over LinkedIn, and I will include this into the report. So thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Okay, see you later.